Awesome. So this is part 2. I'm here with Fabiana Di Cristina, and this is part 2 of our book. This is after Amanda goes to Arizona and Fab goes on the streets. Tell us a little bit about your first week or so on the streets.
So I could say when Amanda left to Arizona, that was definitely my first real time on the streets.
Okay.
You know, living in Franklin Square, I spent some time on the streets, you know, a week here or two there. But when Amanda left to Arizona, that was the whole summer in Ozone Park. So, I mean, I lived in the middle of the neighborhood. The park that I slept in was the park that, you know, people woke up and they went to the park. You know, you played handball, you boxed, you know, we smoked some weed, we got some 40s, and everybody chilled at the park all day. So that's really why I stayed there. There was also an abandoned house not far from the park I used to sleep in sometimes. It was really a crack den. I mean, there was homeless people who lived there. You know, there could be, I could be sleeping in one room and have no idea who's in the next room to me or who's walking in while I'm sleeping.
How did that make you feel? What was going through your head at that point?
I mean, you think that you would be terrified, and maybe I should have been, but I guess, you know, at that point I was kind of numb to it. There's also a certain point that you're so tired, you don't care really. We set up a room, a couple of friends of mine and I. We set up a specific room in that house that was, you know, we called it my room. We put a mattress in there, you know, that we found in there, and God knows what the fuck had been done on it. And you know, we just set it up as a room, and you know, a little spot couch area that we called, you know, another fucking mattress that we found, and we just set it up. And I remember one evening actually, I got really, really fucked up, and so a couple of friends helped me over to the house, and somebody brought some dinner for me, and you know, a few of them sat with me for, you know, a little while before everybody went home. And you know, the next morning I wasn't expecting anybody, and I remember waking up early hearing somebody come into the house, hearing somebody walking up the stairs, and I do remember that was, I mean, it's kind of nerve-wracking, but at the same time, you really, it's really hard to explain. I just kind of felt nothing. You know, it was almost as if it just didn't matter who it was at that point. It was, you know, there wasn't much to my life at that point in time. It was, you know, if it was the cops or if it was whoever. So I didn't have much fear towards a lot of things in those days. But actually, you know, I'm just laying there, and the door creaks open, and it was my friend Simon, who was supposed to be in summer school, you know, but he came to check on me, you know, brought an blunt, you know, and
okay.
you know, he spent the day with me, you know. We sang, you know, and usually I wasn't, you know, I didn't see anybody until usually 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so it was always nice, you know. He brought some breakfast, he brought a blunt, and, you know, we sat and we ate and we smoked, and it was just nice because that really wasn't what my mornings looked like a lot, you know.
Well, what was your morning? Give an example or give a rundown of what your mornings were like.
Mornings and nights probably the darkest times.
Okay.
The loneliest times. The mornings especially is just an uncertain time because you don't know who's coming out, if anybody's coming out. It's not like I had a cell phone in those days. Payphones were my fucking everything. Like I said, I used to know every working payphone, every payphone that you put 50 cents and you get unlimited time in, because I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have any way. It was me walking to people's houses, knocking on the door. You know, it's so-and-so home. or, you know, they came to the park, or you went and found somebody. Otherwise, it was a long, lonely day for me, and who knows what, you know, how many days that would turn into. It would be one day or 2 days or a fucking week that I wouldn't see anybody. And, you know, I relied on my friends. You know, my friends were more family to me than anything, you know, because they were the ones who, you know, I did, not that I had much laundry to do. If I had more than one pair of clothes at the time, then you know, my friends' homes are where I did my laundry. It's where I showered regardless. And, you know, it's where I got food from, if any. I mean, I just didn't have anything. I was at the mercy of anybody that I knew. And that, you know, I was 19 years old. And to feel like that, it just, you have no life. You don't even feel like a person.
Tell me about, in the early days, tell me about one of your darkest days.
I say some of my darkest nights in the early nights are before I went to the Army. It was a really fucking cold winter. And that was just, you know, that was my first real go at it. And it was, I mean, I really spent a lot of time on the streets in those days. Like, I spent a long time on the streets. I would sleep on the subways and I would sleep on the ferry. And in those days, it's probably the beginning days, the subway days, I just really contemplated suicide a lot in those nights because they were just the longest nights in the world. All I could do was ride the subway, ride it back and forth from one end to another. And that's why now I could probably sleep through a fucking nuclear fucking bomb. I mean, I just, you know, I am so used to sleeping in all kinds of situations. I can go to sleep anywhere at any time. And just, I remember a lot of those nights just.
So explain a little bit physically and mentally how it was on you, you know, with those really dark nights.
I still remember one night in particular. That was a fucking hard night on me. You know, like I said, it was a good string. I probably spent a good month or two on the street at that time. Like, talking about nights asleep on the streets. And one night in particular, you know, I'm riding the train, and not every night did I have the room to lay down across a couple of seats. And I'm a big guy. I could take up 5 seats if I fucking wanted to. Sometimes I got 3, sometimes I got 1, and I would, you know, try and pick the right seat, you know, the seat right next to the door that you could just put your arm and lean your head and try and just get some sort of sleep, try and knock out. And but this night I had 5 seats, and I was just, you know, laying across 3, my upper body and my one foot on one seat, and the train stopped, you know, at a particular stop. You know, it was a busy train. It's a subway. They make a lot of stops, and for some reason we're stopped for a decent amount of time at this particular stop. And the next thing I know, I'm getting poked by a couple of cops, and they pull me off the train. Apparently we were stopped at that station for them to come and take me off. And they pull me off the train, and they write me and they ask me, you know, what I'm doing. I tell them quite literally that I am homeless. I sleep on the subway. They tell me that I'm not allowed to take up more than 1 seat, and they write me a ticket, and they proceed to be on their way, and I'm just left waiting for the next train that I have to fucking call my home for the next fucking 6 hours of the night or whatever it was, till my girlfriend at the time, woke up and her parents went to work. And just sitting on those stairs and then standing on that platform waiting for that fucking train, just so alone. It was just the emptiest fucking subway platform, and it was cold, and I was hungry, and I was fucking tired, and I just felt helpless, and I felt hopeless, and I just felt like there was nothing for me. All I had to do was just lean out, just standing on that yellow line. You just fucking close your eyes and you lean forward when that next train's coming, so when it's not stopping at that station. And I wouldn't even fucking feel it. And that's what killed me. That was the hardest thing for me, is to know that the fucking thing that took me out would hurt me less than my every single day life. And I just couldn't do it. And really, in those days, I will swear to you, the only fucking reason I couldn't do it is because Amanda and Sabrina. I just didn't. I couldn't do that.
And why? Because of that?
Because they're the only two people that I could think of that would actually really be affected if I wasn't here anymore.
How would it have affected them?
The only people that would fucking care. The only people
How would it affect them now?
I don't know. I can't speak for them, but we grew up close. We grew up in a house that that not many people can relate to, and so we grew up closer than most siblings. And we might grow apart in our old age, but we share a bond, and not many siblings do. I mean, you're close. There's a brother or a sister, brothers or sisters, or whatever your closest siblings. But we grew up in an environment that just all we had was each other. We didn't go. I especially. Amanda, Sabrina, they were allowed to have friends over. They went out more. But really, it wasn't it wasn't by any means a free-for-all. So we really spent a lot of time together. A lot of siblings don't hang out together, but that's all we had was each other. And, yeah, we fought, so there were times that we didn't talk to each other. But for the majority of it, we spent a lot of time together. And so, I know that, I don't know, I just couldn't do it to Sabrina especially. At that time, she was so much younger, and she had just lost her dad in a day, in a weekend, coming to see her big brother in the Army. And that's what killed me. Sabrina, I know that Sabrina has had an easier, Sabrina has had an easier life than we had, especially once Muhammad left, and it was just her and my mom, and for parts of her senior and junior year, she pretty much lived with my sister. She had like a dream life that Amanda and I only dreamt of. But when she was 12 years old, she was at my grandfather's for Thanksgiving break in New Jersey, or whatever it was, spring recess, winter recess, whatever the hell it was. She was off from school. She was at my grandfather's, and her brother moved out and pretty much never came back. And then a few months later, she goes to Georgia to see her brother in the Army in boot camp, and she never sees her dad again, ever. So I always felt bad for leaving Sabrina, especially. Amanda, I always felt bad for leaving Amanda behind before she left for school, but then she left, and she moves a million miles ahead of me always, my sister. I've always been proud of her. But Sabrina needed me more. Amanda was well on to making her own life, but I knew that she would have, she obviously would have cared. She obviously would have, been affected by losing me. But Sabrina, I don't even know that Sabrina would come back from that at that age, especially. She was so young, and her life changed so much in in not even a year. Amanda and I were waiting for Muhammad to be gone. We couldn't wait for the things that were happening to happen, even though it all went completely different than we thought it would.
Right.
But
now tell me about.
Go ahead.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about one of the lighter days, one of the brighter days in the early time out on the street.
One of the brighter days.
Yeah, because not every day was dark.
Not every day was dark, but I mean, I can't think of a specific day that was brighter than most. In the early days, there really wasn't much.
So it was within the early days, it was just pretty dark and just hard.
Especially in the early days, because I just didn't know anything about living on the streets in that time, and I was learning a lot about my family. Like I said, I didn't really ever think that I would hit that far, that they would just let me live that kind of life. And so I remember one time in the very early days, a dark time, I was just so sick. And I called my Uncle Richie, my mom's cousin. And, I always loved my Uncle Richie. Growing up, my fucking Uncle Richie was my favorite, They would all get drunk. All the uncles would get drunk, and, all you got to do is tell them Uncle Richie's your favorite uncle, and he's fucking handing out fucking 20s, And tell them who's on a Jackson, and you get who's on a 20, and you get a Jackson. That's, Uncle Richie was a fun uncle, But, so I called him, and he came and he picked me up, and he let me spend one night at his house. And he dropped me off at social services the next day, and he gave me $20. And that was it. And I was just I was so sick. And I walked into social services, and I didn't have my Social Security card. I actually lost it with the rest of my possessions at that time. I didn't really have any ID in those days, actually. And so they couldn't do anything for me. I had to, start the process of getting all my ID back before I could apply for assistance. And that was just a lot harder in those days, especially. So, actually, I remember after that, I walked to the Curry's house, and I started staying with them for a while. Whenever I got sick, actually, a lot of times, whenever I got really sick on the street, I ended up living with the Currys again. And I would just, I remember there were more than a few times, there was 2 or 3 times at least, that I hadn't lived with them for some time, maybe even hadn't spoken to them in a long time. And I would just get really, really sick on the streets. And I would end up there, and Mrs. Curry would always take me in, and I would just be fucking dying on their couch for fucking weeks. Sometimes, really, I remember one time I was just dying for like 3 weeks on the couch when she took me in, just dying in the living room. The fucking worst. I probably had pneumonia in those days and just didn't even fucking know it because I didn't have insurance. But So I did end up at the Currys at that time. Those were always the lighter days, I guess. Some days, I guess, were fun, especially living at the Curry. I'd pop up at the Curry's house or, some days were fun. There weren't many fun nights because, I had some nights, people took me in a night here, a night there, so, you had some fun nights. I had some fun days, smoking in the park, drinking in the park, boxing, playing handball, then you just ride around with your friends and just smoke. And, but I felt still not even like a person because I'm the one sitting there eating people's fucking pizza crust. And I'm the one who can't throw down a fucking $1 for a fucking Dutch, I never had 5 on it. And it just, I was just like a fucking, I always felt like a tag-along, even though people never treated me like that. Really, I was fucking, I was more like a pet than fucking anything else. Really, I was eating fucking scrapes. I was relying on people's fucking scraps. They're leftovers, they're throwaways.
And nights become weeks, and weeks become months, and months become years. How long were you out on the street?
Probably a cumulative of 3 years total, maybe, out of 5 or 6. 3 years out of 6, cumulative.
Okay.
Not straight, but at in large chunks at times, especially.
And did it ever become easier?
When I moved back to Floral Park, because I knew more people, I had grown up with people there. When I had Ben, it was really easy. Not really easy, but it was probably easiest when I had Ben. Because
and who's Ben?
I had, huh?
Who's Ben?
Ben was a friend of mine from school, from high school. I was actually, I was friends with his brother Phil first. And and then I met Ben, and Ben was my boy. Ben was he was my boy, He always took me in. He always if Phil and I were beefing, if his, dad didn't want me at the house because Phil and I got arrested together, I slept in Ben's fucking basement closet, a closet that I shoved a futon into that I really couldn't spread my arms out. I could put my elbows, I could tuck my elbows across my chest, and that's about as far as I could go on either side. And but Ben was my boy, and if I wasn't in Ben's house, I was, for a good long while, I slept in a minivan in an Enterprise lot, in a dealership lot rather, around the corner from Ben's house. So Ben's parents would leave early in the morning for work. He would leave the basement door open for me. He would hook me up with food. I remember his mom gave him a rice cooker. Oh my God! I actually thanked her. I reached out to her recently on Facebook because I just, sometimes I think about the things that people do for me, and even if they thought how insignificant it might have been, like, it was life-changing to me at the time. His mom gave him a rice cooker for me to keep in the basement, and I used to make fucking macaroni and cheese and pastas, and I would steal shit from the supermarket, and it was just incredible, for me. A rice cooker, all I need is a pot of water, go steal some fucking, some pasta, and I'm good, But, yeah, so, I remember the best mornings would always be Ben fucking It's terrible because he was skipping school, but it would be Ben skipping school and fucking coming. He knew what van to find me in. You know, he would come wake me up with a fucking bag of weed, you know. Those were, honestly, it always made the day a little easier, you know. It just made the morning a little sweeter for me. And I know it just, you know, some people might not understand that, but, you know, it's the longest night in the world, and you're your own worst enemy at that time because...
What do you mean?
Because all you have is yourself. And
okay.
Sometimes you just drive yourself crazy. Just because
in what way?
You can't turn your thoughts off, and you can't go to sleep, and you just don't have anybody. And
what were some of the thoughts that you were running through your head at the time?
Sometimes if it's not suicide, you just think about committing all kinds of fucking crimes or robbing people and just anything that will make it a little easier. You know, you want to go and fucking rob somebody because, fuck, then maybe you have some money that you can go and get something to eat. You can get some bud. You can fucking get a hotel for the night or something crazy. You know, if you got a good, or if you had some money, you can always fucking, you get some bud and then you fucking, that's your leverage. You find somebody who's chilling, and then you say, oh, you don't have any fun? I'll smoke you up. Can I, you know, get a place to stay for the night? You know? Or you think about sending people up, but then it's just like, there was the days that I did things that, you know, I didn't give much thought to doing. But then
like what?
Very early in my life, I started to really believe in karma.
Okay.
So I tried my best to avoid certain things. You know, I tried my best to avoid robbing people or, you know, setting people up in some sort, you know, in a non-violent way if I had to set somebody up. Or we used to go car hopping a lot. We used to do a lot of car hopping. That was, you know, we go car to car looking for unlocked cars and, you know, and just the things that I think about that I used to do to people now, like, fuck. You know, we used to take, I mean, first of all, we used to find good shit. We used to find money and phones and sunglasses and shit like that. And, yeah, that sucks. You know, I mean, we used to take fucking wrapped gifts that we would find. Christmas time, we taking Christmas gifts, birthday gifts that we would find. But, I mean, we would take bags of tools. And I remember one time we went car hopping and we emptied this car. We took tools, you know, a whole ton of tools. And we maybe walked a couple of blocks and we're like, oh, you know, what are we going to do with this shit? And we can't run with it if we have to run. And we really just started fucking tossing this guy's tools on lawns down the blocks as we went, checking cars. And just that was somebody's fucking livelihood. Thousands of dollars worth of tools. And we just fucking tossed it like it was nothing. And so, like, you know, those are the lighter things. You know, the car hopping really, that was just the easier things, you know. We've broken into a few houses, never with anybody home. But I remember one time we broke into this kid's house. Oh, my God. And we just taking money and liquor. You know, we're stupid kids. And I just had a bad feeling. We climbed in through the window. Had a bad feeling because it was quite literally the middle of the day. And so I walk out the front door, and I cross the street. I'm waiting on the corner for my friends to come out. And I see this lady way down the block. And I was like, oh, my God. You know, walking down towards the house, and I was like, tell me that she is not, you know, she doesn't live here. Tell me it's not Gerald's fucking mom or something. You know, that's the kid's house who it was. And so she's walking. She passes the house. Thank God she's not going into the house because they're still in the house, mind you. So, and I have no way of, you know, telling them anything. She crosses the street, and she comes right up to me, and she asked me if she said, did you just come from that house over there? And I said, yeah. And she looks at me, very strangely. And she says, well, who let you in? And I said, oh, Gerald let me in. And she gives me a strange look. She looks back at the house, and she said, Gerald's home? And I said, yeah. And so she walks back in. She crosses the street. She walks in the front door. And the side door bursts open. Everybody comes running out. And we just run away. We run down the block to my friend's house. And actually the Trinidadian family that I was staying at the time. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of tall Spanish kids. So when it was his aunt who turned out to be, it was Gerald's aunt. And when I talked to him about a week or so later, he knew it was me because she didn't know who I was, but she said the tall Spanish kid. And so that pretty much was it. And they wanted to know who was with me. And they threatened to call the cops if I didn't say. But I never told them who was with me. And but they never did call the police. But it did suck because I was obviously not ever allowed at Gerald's house again. And he used to have a lot of barbecues, a lot of people over. Gerald's house was a place that, people could chill. And so I was not allowed at Gerald's house. So that always did suck. But, those are like the lighter crimes. Nobody got hurt type of things.
Right.
So,
were you ever arrested for anything that you ever did?
I was arrested for quite a few times. There were some days that I just felt like I would never stop being able to get arrested. I just got myself into such a bad way that I just couldn't stay out of trouble. I couldn't stay away from the cops. I lived on the streets, so it was very easy for them to come across me quite often. And I didn't. I did a lot of stupid shit. So I did get arrested. Let's see, the first time I ever got arrested, the very, very first time I got arrested, I was on pins. I was put on pins for getting in trouble. I got in trouble a lot when I was younger. So I got put on pins, which is person in need of supervision, when I was about 16 through family court. My mom and my stepfather took me to family court, and they placed me on pins because they didn't want to, they had already been sued twice for fights that I had gotten into. So they didn't want to be liable for me any longer. So they put me on pins. And so I got arrested. They actually called the police on me for violating pins when I got in trouble in school for gambling. So that was the very first time I got arrested. I was like 16, 17 years old. That's when the Floral Park police started to get familiar with me and my family. After that, when I left my house, I got arrested for trespassing, criminal trespassing, petty larceny, possession of burglars' tools. That was one night we did get arrested, hopping in, car hopping. So that was actually a fun night, but it ended with us getting arrested, and that actually, wow. So when I came home from the Army, I did live. Wait, no. That's when Amanda left. So there was a time when I was living in Ozone Park, and I got really sick on the streets again. I was working at a Christmas tree stand and living at this Christmas tree stand. It was a 24/7 stand, so I would, I had a couple of friends that got me the job, and I would sleep in the Jeep at night, and if somebody came at 2 in the morning, I'd wake up, help them pick out a tree, tie it to the car, and whatever, go back to sleep. I mean, we had a little fucking space heater in the fucking Jeep, and that's what it was. I worked off of tips, and we would buy these huge fucking dime bags. A couple of friends of mine, we'd all throw 10 in, and we'd get 3, 4, 5 bags, and we'd smoke in the back of this tree, Christmas tree stand, and make our money through tips. And we got free lunch, free dinner, pizza usually. And so it was kind of like, it was nice for a while. But then I did end up getting very, very sick again. I got really sick. So for a few days I was living in this Jeep, cutting trees down at 3 in the morning, or picking trees out and, cutting a little off the bottom for people 3 o'clock in the morning, time in people's cars. And I could barely stand and probably got a fever of 100 and God knows what. And so this was obviously right a couple of days before Christmas. And so my sister and her boyfriend at the time actually came and picked me up. I went to my mom's for Christmas Eve, and I hadn't talked to my mom in quite some time, but I talked to my sister, and, I told her I was sick, and she came and got me. And I went to my mom's for Christmas Eve, and I walked in the door, and I walked downstairs to the basement. She didn't let me upstairs in the house. And I just went to sleep on the basement floor for about 2 weeks. I missed Christmas, obviously, that year. I was just so sick. I was, just dying on a broken air mattress, a popped air mattress on the basement floor. Just sick out of my bird. And so after that, I did end up living with my mom for maybe a month or two. And the night we got arrested car hopping, she kicked me out. They called. So the situation was, I was, smoking with some friends, and quite honestly, we were, in those days, again, I came from living on the streets, so I tried to drug away my problems for a while. I tried a lot of different drugs. Not many of them, not really any of them except the bud, except marijuana stuck. But I did have my yay days. I had days that I did coke. So we were doing some coke that night, and we ran out of bud. We ran out of shit. And a friend of mine, he was like, "Oh, I know where I could get some. I think I know where we could get some." This chick that we knew, her dad supposedly kept some bud and some yay in the outside shed. So we were just gonna go break into the outside shed, grab that shit and be out. So it was snowing. There was some snow on the ground, and at that time, it was the winter time. Actually, a big storm. We had just had a big storm. I remember there was a lot of snow on the ground. So the problem is, though, we couldn't just walk into her front yard. It's not like you could just open the gate. They had a locked gate. You couldn't get into the backyard by just walking up. So, but she did live along the railroad tracks. It was a high railroad tracks, but still along the railroad tracks. So our genius plan, we knew of a spot that we could get onto the tracks, and we would walk along the tracks for a few houses and hop into the backyard. So me and my boy, Danny, and Phil, Ben's brother, we go. Phil was a heavy kid, so Phil was waiting down the block for us. Danny and I go. We walk. Luckily for us, the spot that we knew of was right by this tunnel that lets you go onto the track. So the gate was open. It's not like we jumped the gate or there was any sign, no trespassing, anything like that. So we just opened the gate. We walked right up the stairs onto the, railroad tracks. We walked down about 5 houses, and Danny jumps first. And I swear to you, the cops even called him Batman because this freaking kid left off the train tracks, and he jumped like 30 feet into the fucking backyard. And if he hadn't done that, we probably would have gotten arrested right then and there, because the fact that he jumped so damn far, I was like, I can't fucking do that. I'm going to fall in the snow and break my back until the cops come for me. And so that hesitation, that moment of hesitation, a neighbor poked his head out of the back door, out of his side door, And he started yelling at us. So Danny took off. I took off down the railroad track. We met Phil back at the tunnel. And just we all kind of had the adrenaline going. And somebody's fucking bright idea said, hey, let's go hop some cars now. You know? So we ended up going car to car like morons in the snow. So the cops had a really easy time of fucking tracking our way. And, yeah, eventually we did get caught. We got caught. And Phil didn't want to run. So, yeah, you know, Danny and I had nowhere to go. We were running to Phil's house. So we had to stop. And we all got arrested. And Phil's dad came and picked up Danny and Phil. And the cops wouldn't let me go. They insisted on calling my mom. I told them I don't live with my mom. I lied, you know. I wasn't living with my mom for a good time, but I told them I don't live with my mom. I'm over 18. Like, you know, you take me to jail. Take me to the county, you know, whatever. Take me to jail and call my mom. I knew that she would kick me out, you know, and I would rather me just go up and missing for a couple of days, find my way out of jail, if that's what it had to be, and then, you know, because they wanted $500 bail, and I told them I had no bail money. I called Amanda. She couldn't do anything for me. Obviously, she was a college student in Arizona. And so they called my mom. She told them to let me rot. And, yeah, and then they let me go on my own recognizance after they got me kicked out of my house.
Okay, so you're kicked back out on the street, and after that, how long were you out on the street?
A long time, because Mr. Levinson, or Phil's dad, did not want me at the house, so I was living in the van around the corner from his house for a good couple of months for sure. And all I could do was collect blankets.
And you lived out on the streets. Gotcha. And what was the turning point as far as your life taking the turn, you know, moving in the right direction, finding a stable relationship, finding a home? What was the catalyst for this? What happened?
So I had gotten myself off the streets at that time. I did get a settlement from a surgery, from an injury, a while back, and I got myself an apartment, but I got myself a roommate. I thought I was doing the right thing, you know. But I did go I went quite literally from sleeping on the streets one day to having $39,000 in the bank the next day. And just having a large chunk of money like that is a very, very large responsibility. You know, because here I was getting an apartment, furnishing this apartment, buying all kinds of
right.
clothes that I had. You know, I had never in my life owned 2 pairs of sneakers at once, you know? So I was buying a new pair of sneakers every day of the week. And I could go to the mall and spend $2,000 and geez, I still have, $35,000 in the bank. I'm never going to run out of money. And I got a roommate, and we signed an agreement. I fronted everything. You know, I fronted the security. I got it sent to the apartment. I fronted all the money for the furniture. And the deal was that he was supposed to pay the rent for the first 4 months, and he owed me $10,000 back after that. And he worked for the racetrack, so he made a very good living. So I felt like he was reliable. And so what happened was, I blew through the money very quickly, and he had some addictions that I was not aware of, And one day he said he was going to go do his laundry, and and he never came back. He never came back. And I went in his room. I went into his room a couple of days after. And he left his TV, everything, but he took his pillows, and that was when I knew. I was like, I realized he's not coming back. And then a few days after that, the landlord came knocking on the door, and he had never paid me any of the money back that he was supposed to pay me, but apparently he had not paid any of the rent since we moved in either. So we were about 4 months behind on the rent, 5 months behind on the rent. Actually, maybe at that time, 6 months behind on the rent. And because I blew through my money already, or maybe I was on my last $8,000 or $4,000, and it didn't take me long to go through that. And so I was getting evicted, and I started to hang out with a friend of mine, Vinny, that I hadn't seen in a long time. Vinny used to hold me down a lot, though, back in the day. Vinny and his mom used to actually do a lot for me. I would kind of spend the weekends at Vinny's. Vinny would go to school and he would leave his house key in the barbecue for me in the backyard. And, his mom would come home from work and I'd be sleeping on the futon at Daniela. And I loved Daniela because she was good to me. She really was good to me. She didn't have a lot of money, and God bless her heart, because Vinny was probably is one of the craziest people that I have ever known. But Vinny was actually on dope at the time, but I wasn't aware of it when I started to hang out with him again for the first time. I thought he was getting his life together because he was going to a school called Sanford Brown. He was studying to be a medical assistant. And I was taking naps at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, waking up at 8 o'clock and just depressed with my life, getting evicted. Again, I thought that when I got the settlement money that my life was going to change forever, that I was never going to be broke again. I would never live on the streets again. And, here I was. I blew through the money. I had no friends anymore, really, I thought. I was getting evicted. I had no cable. I would wake up every day in an empty house, no cable, and I would just sit there just depressed and just not ever knowing how I was going to fix my life without being a drug dealer. And so I woke up from one of my naps one evening at about 7:30, 8 o'clock one night, and I hit a Vinny. And he texted me back, and he said, "I can't talk right now, bro. I'm in class." And like I said, Vinny quite possibly is one of the craziest people I've ever known. And for Vinny to be saying that to me, I'm in class, I can't talk to you right now, and I'm waking up at 8 o'clock at night from a nap, doing nothing with my life. It just dawned on me at that moment. I said, if he is doing this right now, I know that I can do this. I know I can at least do what he's doing. And if you talk to me a month before that, if you talk to me a week before that, if you talk to me an hour before that, I probably would have told you that I would have never gone back to school. That school's not for me, bro. I barely got through high school. I get sick at the thought of doing schoolwork. But just knowing that I knew somebody that was already there, and I knew very well what he was capable of and what I am capable of. And I knew that if he can do it, I can do it. So it kind of gave me some motivation to say, hey, at least let me go talk to somebody there. And so, and I even attempted, I thought, hey, maybe I'll even, try and get into his class. But he was a couple of months ahead of me. And I wasn't really looking to deal with, quite honestly, I wasn't looking to deal with other people's blood and piss and vomit. So I didn't want to go the MA route. I went to medical billing and coding. Mm-hmm. And, I had been out of school for almost 10 years at that time. So I thought, at the very least, the very best, this is a good way for me to for me to start off. I can get a ride with Vinny. I can get a ride home, with Vinny and his mom. I know somebody there. It's only 4 or 5 hours a night, 4 hours a night, 4 days a week. It's not this huge jump. It's not this every day. And I was taking night classes. So I knew that no matter what, even if I fucking hung out all night and got twisted and fucked up until 7 o'clock in the morning, I can get myself to class at 6 o'clock at night, 6 to 10. That's all I got to do. And I would be in class some nights till 10 o'clock, and I would have my friend Michelle starting the party at my house while I'm still at class. I'd come home and there'd be this raging party in my house, and I wasn't even there yet. But so it didn't, it didn't matter to me. I didn't feel like I was missing anything, and I felt like, I didn't feel like I was getting myself, taking on too much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will never forget it, honestly. I met Jennifer in the halls of Sanford Brown for the first time. The first time that I ever saw her, she was walking down the hall with her friends, and she knew, she thought she was, and we'd laugh about it all the time. Because I always tell her, I was like, you were like the mean girls. You were the leader of the pack. You knew you were hot shit, because she was the most beautiful girl that I had ever seen at that time. And believe it or not, she was talking to Vinny. She was, with Vinny at that time. And so the way that it was set up was I was talking to her friend, and she was talking to Vinny. She had a friend. Vinny was already with her. So, that's how it was said, So it's just funny that we started as friends, and it wasn't even anything that I ever even considered would happen because she was with Vinny. And, time went on. And coincidentally enough, I owe Vinny's mom probably the most. I owe Daniela the most for Jen and I getting together, because Vinny did have a girl at the time, a girlfriend that Jen didn't know about. And so one night, Vinny's mom called Jen, bugging out, going crazy. And that same night, Jen called me, asking about it. And, I didn't give anything up, but she called me all upset, And so I saved her number. And like I said, Vinny was on dope in those days. So he, him and Jen stopped talking. And he took a little leave of absence from school, a medical leave. And he actually, medically, his heart stopped on drugs one night. So he took some time off to go to rehab. And Jen and I, we were friends. We just, we would joke around. We would hang out, on the lunch breaks that we had. And, it wasn't anything crazy. But one day we were talking in the hallway, and she just gave me this look. I swear to God, she gave me this look. And I looked at her, and I never thought honestly, in my life, I never thought that I had a chance for her. I thought that, and trust me, I give myself credit. I know that I'm a handsome man. I know that I have good game. I can talk a good game, but I really thought that Jen was out of my league. I never thought that she was interested in me, honestly. And she just gave me a look one day we were talking, and she just gave me this look, and I was like, does this girl like me? And so I texted her, and she came to hang out with me that weekend. And she didn't drive in those days, so she took the train all the way from Farmingdale to Belrose to come and see me the weekend after the 4th of July. And ever since that weekend, her and I have been together. Like, we were together. We weren't anything really serious in those days, but we just kind of grew closer and closer,
Yes.
And it's crazy how it works.
And tell me a little bit about your life now.
So really, I always say that Sanford Brown was my turning point. I could have never imagined what would happen from Sanford Brown alone. Like I said, I met Jennifer. We had a baby. My boy is 4 years old now. and we are expecting a second one in July, another boy. We've been engaged. Weddings are quite expensive, so we've been engaged for a couple of years now. But from Sanford Brown, it was just incredible because I got a certificate of completion. It wasn't even a degree or anything like that. I got a certificate of completion from Sanford Brown. And it sat on my shelf for a couple of weeks, and I was proud of myself. I finished with a 3.97 when I graduated high school with a D average. I graduated high school, I was like the bottom of the bottom percentile. And so for me to finish with a 3.97, 1B plus, and I was furious because that 1B plus was an 89. And 89 was the only thing that kept me from a 4.0. And so I was furious because you'd look at my transcript from those days and it's A, B, and then another string of A's, and it just, it kills me because I never thought that I would ever in my life, I used to root for a 65, 65, baby, 65, stay alive. And so, that's all I would go for. So I was proud of myself. But after staring at that for a couple of weeks, one day I was just in my apartment and I just said, you know what? I want a diploma. Now I want a diploma. I did that, now I want a diploma. And so I looked into some schools, and most of them wouldn't take the, transcript from Sanford Brown because it wasn't a college. So they were they would look at my transcript from high school, and I didn't want that. So I found a school, Briarcliff, who was actually affiliated with Sanford Brown, and they took some credits even. Not only did they take the transcript, but they, took some credits, transferred. And I ended up getting my associate's and my bachelor's degree at Briarcliff. At one point, I started out really slow. I started out right before Brendan was born, and I started out like one class at a time. I didn't want to take on too much. I didn't know how I would do, and I ended up doing really well. But because of some sort of issue with financial aid, I ended up having to go for my bachelor's 4 nights a week, 5 hours a night. So in those days, I worked 2 jobs, and I went to school 6 to 11 Monday through Thursday. So it was a lot. I was a new dad. I would leave the house 7:30 in the morning sometimes, work 9 to 5, school 6 to 11, and then, go and clean the office at night. But that's how I got my bachelor's. And then I got my bachelor's, and I said, I've come this far. And again, I never thought I could go this far, so why not just keep going? So now I am a graduate student at Malloy. I study business marketing, and I'm just looking forward to the future.
And where do you
really know? I don't really know what is going to come of it, but I feel it in my heart. I feel it in my bones, in my soul. I've always known that I will be successful. I will be successful. I know that this book will have a lot to do with that. I feel like just not only the success that comes from the book, but just the barriers that I'll overcome and the things that I'll be facing, and that I can finally put aside by putting all this out there and actually making something of my story, and maybe the avenues and the opportunities that this book will give me. I can do things that I've always wanted to do, that I've always dreamt of doing, that I've just never had the opportunity or the resources, really.
Nice. And are there any final thoughts that you'd like to let the reader know?
In regards to what exactly?
In regards to your life and your mission and what you'd like them to take away from this book.
I guess overall, I would say first and foremost is that you got to give me a minute to think of how to word it. Forgive me. So even when you feel like you can't believe in yourself, when you don't believe in yourself, when you have no reason to believe in yourself, that's when you need to pick yourself up the most. I mean, there were times that I really had no reason to ever believe that my life would even be a slightly bit okay. But I just fucking picked my head up and I just kept going. And there were times that, like I said, I wanted to fucking lean in front of that truck or that train and just, the pain wouldn't be mine anymore. It would be somebody else's. But it's not, that's not the answer to fucking anything. And, you know, like you hear all the time from, you know, anybody who's ever survived a suicide attempt, those very few Golden Gate Bridge jumpers, you know, they say the moment that they jumped, they regretted it. And that's the thing. Sometimes you make a choice, and when you jump, you can't take it back. And no matter how bad things are, you never, ever, ever know what tomorrow holds. You never know what tomorrow holds. You never know what decision you'll make or who you'll meet or what will come. But if you give up, then you will never know, ever.
Awesome.
And it's never too late. It's never too late. And you can't put it off. You can't procrastinate. Because you never, ever know when today is your last tomorrow.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for sharing, Fabian. That was